All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Youth Bombs. I am Coleman.
I'm Tim.
All right. So, in this episode, we are going to talk about the Mises Institute and my little trip down to Tampa, Florida on February 22nd, and what I learned about education and how economics plays into it, and how Austrian and what is, in general, the Austrian economic perspective on this. So, let's start at the crack of dawn, right? So this is where I got to get up at 5:30. I make my breakfast, and then Holden and his friend Caddy pick me up in, their car. We drive 2 hours down to Tampa, Florida, and then, of course, we're dealing with a bunch of libertarian nerds here, basically, and like maybe a couple conservatives here and there, but yeah, just nerds all across the board. Maybe I counted like 3 women who were like my age, and the rest were just. And I frankly, like, the rest were either like my age, college students, and then most of them were like 60 and up, but in like retirement age. So we were kind of a fish out of water, but hey, I think it was fun. And then I'll get a little more into that as we go. So, Tim, I think, and you were the person who kindly enough gave me the ticket to this event. So how long have you been involved in the Mises Institute?
Well, I've kind of tracked them a little bit over the last couple of years. I'm a big fan of Austrian economics. I think it's the preferred way of actually looking and analyzing economic decisions and principles. I think they're spot on. Of course, in my work with the Birch Society, we overlap quite a bit with that thinking as well, since we subscribe to Austrian economics and their thinking as well. So, and we've had mutual members within both organizations, and we've actually interviewed Dr. Jonathan Newman here on the show before. I think Holden did that probably a couple of months back. You can go look in the history. Yeah. And he was one of the speakers at this event, right?
Yes, and he was the first one, in fact, and then he... I didn't know this, but he's a children's book author, and he wrote, The Broken Window and like The Ludwig the Builder. Those were 2 of his books, and his idea is, hey, in order to like imbue the values of Austrian economics to people who are, like say just learning how to read, let's make fun little picture books for the children, and then say like teach the values.
So do you even understand the reference for the broken window?
Yeah, so the broken window fallacy is a concept or parable by Mr. Bastiat, or Frederick. This is how you say it? Yeah, Frederick Bastiat.
I think it was Hazlitt.
Oh, if that's his first name? Oh, okay.
Henry Hazlitt. He wrote a book called Economics in One Lesson, and one of the analogies or the examples he uses in the book is the broken window analogy. Yeah,
and so anyway, regardless of who came up with it, like the concept here is, if property gets damaged via, a rock being thrown to a window, this spurs economic development because, we're employing a person to, fix the window, and that is good. But the problem here is it's a fallacy in the sense of, why not just use the money that could have been saved, Okay, so the store owner who had the window, they could have saved their money instead of having their window broken and invested it, which would have incurred further, economic growth later, in lighter terms. Or they could just like spend it on a good, and you could just put it in the economy in a more direct, productive way. So it's kind of like it's an illusion of a gain, while there really isn't a gain here. So that's the broken window fallacy.
So there's a lineup of speakers that were from the Mises Institute, which is actually at the campus of Auburn University in Auburn, Alabama. But what would you say off the top of your head was the speaker you found the most interesting, that you liked the most? What was it about them?
There's 4 speakers total. Started with Jonathan Newman, Jason Jewell. I think there's a third one, and then there's the president himself, Thomas DiLorenzo. I honestly liked Jonathan Newman the best because, in addition to, because via like these like children's stories, it helped me too as a 23-year-old understand these Austrian economic concepts a bit better too. And there's there's stuff you've like learned already, like as an econ student myself, like fractional reserve banking, indirect exchange, the double coincidence of wants. Yeah. But like what I didn't know beforehand, and it's funny enough, we were talking about, Holden actually taught me this right before Jonathan Newman came on the stage, but he referenced the same thing, coincidentally, as a Robinson Crusoe economy, where we have this Mr. Robinson, he's on an island by himself, and then, of course, he has to make trade-offs as to what he needs to do to survive, and that teaches the concept of opportunity cost.
Right.
And then once you, Mr. Friday, as a second island person, then you can therefore teach the concept of comparative advantage thereafter.
Sure. And was Jonathan just talking about his books, or what was the actual, what was his topic actually?
Well, it's how do we teach these concepts to people? And then that was sort of one of the themes of the conference as a whole. So his focus was younger people.
Yeah, and this kind of diverges from your sort of background in your education. You're a master's student here at University of Florida in economics, which is heavily more in the Keynesian philosophy.
Yeah.
Correct? So tell us a little bit about maybe your conversion, or just the fact that, hey, you mean there's another way to think about this stuff besides the Keynesian theology?
Yeah.
And, tell us. I think that'd be kind of interesting for people to hear.
So I think it's important to distinguish, what exactly is the Keynesian view and how that's, imbued within the curriculum. I think the easiest way to talk about it is, there's the Mises' concept of the master builder, right? You're familiar with this.
Yeah.
And this is a critique of, Keynesian economic theory. In a sense, it's a critique of central planning, where if there is theoretically a master builder who's a master of all trades, even he couldn't manage the economy as well as the lump sum of the aggregate, who, via each person individually managing their own prices, setting them, and each person does their own part within the free market, then that's overall is more efficient than a central planner. So now if we get into Keynesian, how I'm seeing that in the curriculum, I can just cite one specific example. I can give more, but it's government intervention is sort of a given, honestly, in a lot of instances here. And this is a problem of what's called paternalism, in the sense of this is on the consumer end, where paternalism is a critique of big government. Since why does the government have to decide for me what is good for me? And this gets into a lot of the concept of internalities, and it's people won't understand this unless I give examples, so I will. Taxing cigarettes, or limiting where people can smoke cigarettes, and via government policy, the concept is, cigarettes are bad for your health, and they're also bad for other people via secondhand smoke. So that's an internality, and then the externality. So therefore, we as benevolent government are going to come in and restrict where you can smoke, and then also make it harder for you to smoke in the first place.
So what were some of the other topics that were covered? You mentioned DiLorenzo. He actually is I think he's the author of The Real Lincoln, which is actually a pretty interesting book. You can get it on audiobook.
Yeah, it's...
I actually like that book quite a bit. It definitely sheds some new light on President Abraham Lincoln, who coincidentally, I actually went to Ford's Theater last week. I was in D.C. For work, meeting with some of the folks up on the Hill, and I hadn't been there before, but it was kind of interesting because the balcony where Abraham Lincoln was shot is still preserved. It's kind of, they blocked it off. It's all kind of the way
I've been there too.
It was then, and we went over to the house across the street, but not to diverge too much. What were some of the other topics?
Yeah, so Jason Jewell, he was up next. He talked about current trends in higher education, and then how the red states were sort of leading the solutions.
Were you seeing, while they were talking, were you kind of seeing some of this in your walk at the University of Florida? I mean, did you hear them and go, yeah, I saw that 3 weeks ago in my whatever class, or anything like that?
Okay, well, I think it's a matter of, how do I put it? Yeah, I mean, it's there wasn't so much shock value as to when you're oh, no way, I have crazy liberal people on my campus, right?
Sure,
it's just a matter of it's a given at this point, and for instance, the conservative influencers have been talking about this problem for at least 10 years at this point, so it's it's kind of part of the vernacular.
Nothing really new.
Well, I'll get into the new stuff.
Okay.
So this person, Jason Jewell, I think was recently appointed as the inaugural chief academic officer of the Florida University system, which is cool. And he also talked about the role of the Florida Board of Governors how they influence the education system. And as far as like giving, a case study of like good red state policy to sort of combat, DEI, subliminally Marxist ideologies. It referenced the 2022 Florida House Bill 1557, the parental rights of education, or if you're a progressive, it's the Don't Say Gay bill.
Sure, yeah. That's right.
Beyond that, I talked to Holden. I wish there was a little bit more talk about the solutions. Like a lot of data, say, for instance, given by Timothy Terrell, was talking about the problems. I wish there was more talk about solutions, like brainstorming, what have you. But when I asked Colton about this, like, Coleman, are you kidding me? We're in the realm of ideas. We don't participate. We're libertarians. So we're anarcho-capitalists. We just like to, bitch and moan. Yeah.
Fair enough, but yeah, you're right. I mean, what good is it? I know in my life, I really don't need another problem identifier, and I tell my kids this all the time.
Yeah.
Well, the world doesn't need any more problem identifiers. What we need are problem solvers.
Yes.
So I think your point's well taken, at least by me.
Right.
That
cool.
It actually is moving the ball down the field versus just complaining.
Yeah, well, good for you, Tim. Yeah, and I'm glad you recognize that as well. So, and then I think I'm glad Florida is also leading the other nations, because with that specific bill I just referenced, you got copycat bills in Ohio and Tennessee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, which were good. And as far as Thomas DiLorenzo himself, I got to talk to him right before the conference.
Oh, nice.
And of course I think he gets. It's funny enough when you search up his controversial takes. Apparently free market ideology is controversial, but something that's granted pretty controversial is neo-Confederate ideology, or at the very least historical revisionism of Abraham Lincoln, alleging
that's his wheelhouse.
That's his wheelhouse, baby. Yeah,
yeah, man.
Talking about Lincoln have a homosexual affair, or saying he didn't free any slaves, or he was hesitant to give up his own slaves.
Yeah.
How he was very statist, etc.
Did Lee Lorenzo bring up? So the Mises themselves have a couple of different podcasts. Radio Rothbard, I think, is one.
Right.
And they've really kind of been hammering on the whole idea of the economic consequences of tariffs that are being talked about by Trump. Did that happen to come up?
So tariffs. So the focus of this specific meeting was, education and the economics of education, and sort of the trends of enrollment patterns, fertility rates, what have you. So the tariffs were not brought up, I'm sure. I mean, we did have about an hour conversation about tariffs in the ride down with Caddy and Holden.
Of course you did. You were with Holden.
Of course I did, right? Yeah. So, no, we didn't. Tariffs were not brought up during this specific conference.
Did you stick around? There was sort of a powwow afterwards, I think, at a restaurant.
Yeah, there was an
after. Did you go to the social?
Yeah, there was some sort of social at a beer place. We instead went to a little cafe instead with a third friend of ours named Abraham. So we brought him along too, and he's super smart too. So,
you said that you were kind of the odd man out or something like that. Say again why you are saying that. Or was it mostly older people, and you were the youngest ones in the room?
I would say mostly people seemed either 40s and up.
Oh.
I would say maybe 70% 40 and up, and then 30% some people millennials and Gen Z.
Yeah. Could you tell whether or not you were new? You guys were obviously new. This is the first time you went there.
Yeah.
Could you tell whether or not everybody else was sort of a regular, and now you were kind of the new kid in the room sort of thing at all?
I think I dressed apart, because this was most people were wearing blazers and then ties and nice attire. Okay. So, that on that end, I dressed apart, so I didn't seem too out of water here. Of course, because this is a libertarian event, you get some people who show up in cargo shorts, flannels.
Well, I remember it said business casual, I think was the required. But was it obvious? Within the audience itself, was it kind of obvious that you were new and everybody else had been there multiple times? And
beyond no, to be honest, no.
So you couldn't even tell if anybody else was new also.
No.
Because, if you certain groups, if you go into the same place all the time, you kind of start attracting the same people, come to the events repeatedly over and over and over again. And then all of a sudden, you got a couple new faces in the crowd, and they really stand out. So I was just, I don't know, I was just kind of thinking whether or not that was sort of obvious to them that you guys were new. And did Holden get a chance to talk with Dr. Newman about the interview that we did on Youth Bombs?
I don't think so, no. I didn't see Holden talk to Newman, so no, I can't say so.
Okay, gotcha.
I also did know that, like, again, on the social media aspect, like, there are 2 new podcasts. Apparently, they hired someone for who does TikTok now for them.
Oh, okay.
So they're getting into TikTok now, which is fun.
Okay.
And I think one of the things
economics is not boring. That's the takeaway here. Economics is not boring.
Can't be fun, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, hey, we've got whole departments at the University of Florida that focus on it. I got my degree in food and resource economics in the College of Agriculture. But I don't know. Economics to me is very exciting. It's, all boiled down to cost versus benefit analysis. I mean, everything that kind of winds out in life and plays out is, do you want this or do you want that? Is that more valuable or is that more valuable to you? And one reason why, or one of the bigger reasons why I like Austrian economics is because it really breaks it down to that just basic point and let the market decide. Because ultimately, if you have central planning and they screw up, the domino effect from a central planning standpoint is just massive. Where if you have thousands of people in the marketplace making decisions, if one person makes a mistake, it's so isolated. You don't have these big ripple effects. That's what we talk about in economics when you talk about the boom-bust cycle. That's intentionally done by the Federal Reserve and the economists over in Capitol Hill working together. They create these cycles. They take advantage of them. This is how we get these, where these representatives that are, making $170,000 a year, a couple of years later after they're going out of office, they're multimillionaires. Yeah. They're taking advantage of the boom-bust cycle. And the way we grow and contract the money supply is based directly on the policies of the Federal Reserve. And those things manifest in prices. The gallon of gas isn't any more or less valuable than it was 2 weeks ago. It's just the price goes up and down because the value of the dollar goes up and down based on how much they're flooding the market, watering down the dollar, or they're contracting the market and making the dollar more valuable. But 99% of our dollar value has disappeared since the founding of the Federal Reserve in the early 1900s. And boy, we could go on and on about that. But why don't you go ahead and you open? So why don't you go ahead and close this out? Okay.
Yeah. So on this. I still don't agree with everything about the Austrian perspective. Like, part of the thing I'm still trying to juggle with is, they break down, the concepts quite nicely, but in order to do that, they have to, explain things in very simplified models. So it is a matter of, if things scale up, do these principles still hold? And then it's a matter with central planning, though. I think I still have, the instinct of, generally you want, free trade, free enterprise, limit government intervention whenever possible, because there's always unintended consequences, and then often it's like whack-a-mole effect.
Yep.
So, and then on this matter, I will say, hey, if you're interested and any of this sound interesting, I recommend looking at Mises.org. That is MISES.org. You can, they like to write, they like to talk. We're dealing with, economic nerds here, so if you want to check all of that out, you can. And hey, I had fun. So at the end of the day. So if you like this video, guys, be sure to like the like button, subscribe, comment, and if you have any inquiries, it is youthbombs@alatrarepublicans.com. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good day.
See ya.